During the fire, this is a backdrop. As I mentioned earlier, we have been in extreme drought. And the day of the fire, as it relates to the fire weather and the state of California, was unprecedented. Generally speaking, we have fire conditions. They start north in the summer, but then generally speaking, when we start getting our significant Santa Ana winds that we're concerned about here in your area in November, that generally speaking, Northern California has received several inches of rain and several feet of snow in the Sierras. Well, this year is different. This year that did not occur. Generally speaking, after there's significant rainfall and snowpack in Northern California, resources in the state of California are then redeployed to Southern California and staged for an event like the Woolsey incident. But that didn't happen because on November 8th, there were 3 fires. First was the Camp Fire in Northern California, which many of you may have heard that impacted the city of Paradise. Second was the Hill Fire in Ventura County. And then third was the Woolsey Fire that we're here to discuss today. And those 3 fires and the things that I'm saying have context. The first part of that context is the fact that the fire that we're discussing today did start in Ventura County. And Ventura County Fire Departments, they're not here to defend themselves, and they don't need to be here to defend themselves, but they have most of their department committed to another fire, the Hill Fire, that started before this fire. So the typical response that they would have had was not available. As I mentioned earlier, we typically meet annually, the Ventura County Fire Department, LA County Fire Department, and LA City Fire Department. So we did have a robust response to that fire. And LA City did also have a robust response to the fire. The reason that I wanted to show you the videos, if you remember the first clip, was Thursday night, the first night of the fire. And even though that fire was not in our jurisdiction, we were aware of the potential for it to burn to our jurisdiction. So we did all that we could to prevent that from occurring all night. From firefighters in hazardous conditions, our pilots flying all night in those conditions. We did all that we could that we thought was appropriate to stop the fire from burning to our jurisdiction, but I might say unsuccessfully. But we did all that we could. As you may be aware, and I know that some of the citizens in the room I've talked to before about previous fires, and we've had previous fires in this region, but this fire was unlike any other previous fire. I was the incident commander on the 2005 Topanga fire that started in the general vicinity where the Woolsey fire started. And that year, we were successful in stopping the fire at the 101 freeway because we did have available resources, number one. And then number two, when that fire front hit the freeway in 2005, the winds were blowing approximately 15 to 20 miles per hour, so there were more favorable fire conditions. This year, in 2018, when the fire hit the 101 freeway, we had winds up to 70 miles per hour. First thing in the morning. And that was another reason to depict some of those pictures on the slides in the video, number one. Next, and we'll be able to allow some of our incident commanders to talk at a later date, and I know the time today because we have questions, is that we requested a significant amount of resources for assistance through mutual aid. And because of competing issues and other challenges, those resources were not made available. So that meant that we needed to do and make do with what we had, primarily from my jurisdiction, LA City, Orange County, and other local municipalities during this fire. We did not get significant assistance through mutual aid from other partners until day 3. And as you saw in this fire, it got to Malibu the next day. In addition to that, in my dialogue with my counterparts in Northern California, they were briefing me about the Camp Fire. And they articulated to me Chief Osby, We don't know how many fatalities we have, but we have a significant amount of fatalities on our fire, and that was in the city of Paradise, and at that time, we didn't know the numbers. But from that dialogue, we made the determination at the command level to consciously focus on saving lives here. We did not want to repeat what occurred at the campfire. And I will tell you, it was a conscious decision that I own. But we did it sometimes at the expense of losing houses, but for the objective of saving lives. When the fire got to the 101 freeway and it jumped, that was a trigger point to evacuate from the 101 freeway to the Pacific Ocean. And that's a footprint of tens of thousands of acres. We evacuated over 250,000 people, the size of Denver, or for people that are here maybe from the East Coast, 7 times larger than the borough of Manhattan. That we did all that in a matter of hours. And I know that the evacuations weren't perfect, that we planned all night with the Sheriff's Department and the CHP, but the fact of the matter, they were effective because we're here. And that was the objective, to really focus on saving lives. In addition to that, as the fire jumped the 101 freeway, and you can see the footprint of this fire from the inception to the ocean, that once it got to the 101 freeway, within 5 hours it was impacting the Pacific coast, which is unprecedented. That we had firefighters trying to come over the ridge from the 101 side of the freeway, chasing the fire. At some given point, unsuccessfully, because we had power lines down, we had landslides. As you saw in the video, when it looked like it was night, that was really daylight hours, very untenable environment, but firefighters were in there trying to protect homes. But in many instances, on that side of the hill, then also as they were coming around up PCH into Malibu, saving lives. I know that we can focus on the fact that in this incident, unfortunately, we lost 3 lives. And we are deeply saddened by that fact. And also on this incident, we lost over 1,000 homes in the entire footprint in the county of Los Angeles. And we're deeply saddened by that also. But in that footprint, like I articulated, we evacuated over 250,000 people, and there were over 57,000 homes in that footprint that were saved. So moving forward, I know that there's a lot of questions that need to be asked today that we will answer to the extent that we can. From the cards, to the extent that we can, we will answer. For the questions that we do not answer, if we got them via email, we will respond back to them via email. I've committed to the city that we're going to sit down, and that's part of the reason why we're here today, to talk about lessons learned. What happened? Why did it happen? What can we do in the future if it occurs again to be better prepared? Through the Honorable Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, she's hired an outside consultant to look at the entire incident from the federal, state, local level, and the response, lessons, the successes, and then lessons learned. Also in my department, we're going to do our after-action review that we do after every incident to talk about successes, lessons learned, and how we can apply those moving forward. In conclusion, I will just simply talk about briefly the rebuilding of Malibu. My department and the county and the city are committed to the rebuild. And I know that in my organization, we've responded to disasters throughout the world. We have an urban search and rescue team that goes to disasters throughout the world. As it relates to my tenure as an incident commander like these gentlemen are now, the largest disaster I went to and oversaw was Hurricane Katrina in the city of New Orleans in 2005. Devastating experience, but the city rebuilt. Our commitment and what we've already done to this point is we met with your city manager, wherever she is, but fire department, regional planning. She's here locally and she is committed. But she's met with regional planning, the fire department, public health, and building and safety in relation to identifying homes that were lost, the locations of those homes, getting building plans that they exist to try and to advance to look at how we can help people rebuild as it relates to the codes from all 4 entities. As it relates to the fire department, because we do have fire codes too, water and access, that we're going to look at each lot and we are going to do what we believe is reasonably safe to help people rebuild. We have that same commitment from the waterworks. We have that same commitment from building safety. We have that same commitment as it relates to public health. And the reason I say public health, I know there's a lot of septic systems in this region and they have that responsibility. And so we're going to do all that we can to help rebuild Malibu. I will tell you that I can probably stand here and talk all day, but I know that there were a lot of questions that needed to be asked and answered, so I brought my staff to respond to your questions, and we will come out as many times as we need to ensure that you're satisfied with our response. You may not always agree with our response, but I would like you to understand that, especially when you see your firefighters locally, they did all that they could do. And I hope that you can acknowledge that. I just hope that you could, because they did. And as it relates to holding someone responsible, that's why I'm here. So if someone needs to be, I don't want to take a beating, but someone needs to get a beating or picked on or ask difficult questions, I'm that person. That's why I'm here. So with that being stated, I know that we have questions. I brought Chief Ewald to help categorize some of the questions, and then between myself and Chief Pena and Chief Richardson, we'll begin to answer those questions.
Okay, what I've done is taken the questions and I've put them into 4 primary categories, and we'll try to talk about these together. The first one is going to involve firefighting operations, and it has some of the subcategories are firefighter actions. There's a lot of questions related to the actions that were either taken or not taken by firefighters, so we'll address that. We will talk about aircraft, the utilization of aircraft, the availability of aircraft, and some other questions. Communications, what took place, and resources, and then there's other questions mixed in. We'll move on into evacuations to talk about the evacuation process, and then there's questions regarding the rebuild and requirements, some of which Chief Osby's already touched on, but we'll review those questions. And then there's a lot of questions that come back to, in the future, moving forward, the issues of volunteerism and what people within Malibu can do to be of greater assistance in times of disaster in the future. So with that, I'll go ahead and start. The first question was, when the fire began on November 8th, it was reported in the LA Times that the LA County Fire Department waited in LA County, 10 miles from the fire, from Ventura County. Why did they not go to the Woolsey fire immediately?
I can address that. David Richardson, I'm the Chief Deputy of Emergency Operations for the department. Early on, as the fire chief mentioned, this particular area is not immune to fires throughout history. I too was on the last one, the 2005 fire that started right off the 118 freeway. We know the concern. That's why it's called the mutual threat zone and the potential. It's a very difficult country, if you've ever been in there, near the Rocketdyne property, a lot of canyon roads and what have you. The Los Angeles County Fire Department, as the fire chief mentioned, sent a robust response. What does that mean? That means that we not only our first alarm brush assignment, we were augmented for the day. We were pre-planned. We were pre-positioned with resources, meaning we had extra engines, strike teams available to respond. We responded to the location. On what the LA Times was reporting, again, I know for a fact what I'm telling you now was provided to the Times. Whether they choose to put it in the article or not, that's on them. The bottom line was, we, as the chief articulated, we responded with a robust response, as we do any brush fire, but especially during an augmented, predicted fire weather day, as we knew Thursday into Friday as well was going to bring us. We have a robust response from the aircraft as well. We need to keep in mind the time of day when what was going on here. Late afternoon, approximately 2:30, about 2:35, the fire started. With that, think about that a moment. How much daylight do you have between 2:30? It gets dark about 5:30, right? So that means our contract air, we contract with the government of Quebec for super scoopers. You've seen them fly before. They fly during daylight hours only. We only use them for a short period of time before they were grounded for the evening. In addition to that, we have a contract heavy lift helicopter, Erickson air crane, that was dropping, trying to contain the fire as well within that footprint. And keep in the back of your mind, the wind is howling. The wind is blowing, pushing that fire. The initial reports were 5 to 10 acres, and already reporting structures threatened. So now you have this wide footprint. You have Bell Canyon, which the city of Los Angeles has contractual services with Ventura County, right? So we have structural defense issues there, and then you have the fire now pushing further into Ventura County, as already mentioned, is already depleted on resources. So the fact of the matter is, we responded. Just to touch on briefly, we responded to additional strike teams. And what wasn't well articulated in that article was the fact that the additional four strike teams, additional 20 fire engines were pre-deployed. Again, the whole intent trying to keep the fire the other side of the 101 freeway and protecting unincorporated Agora, all those communities on the other side of the freeway, trying to tactically get in there, not only life safety, getting people out of harm's way, but also trying to provide some sense of structured defense in those communities. And you can see through the video what those firefighters were dealt with that evening. So to sum up, we responded when we engaged, and as the fire chief alluded to, unprecedented fire behavior. I've been in this business over 32 years, number of fires throughout, not only locally. I spent 9 years on a federal incident management team that provided me experience to bring back to the county. This fire behavior was unprecedented. In addition to the LA County Fire Department response, I want to tell you, the chief alluded where we committed resources. I cannot tell you and share with you what an awful feeling it is when I have discussion with my state partners, and a unified command, Chief Pena and I, with Ventura County, with the city of Los Angeles, meeting with our state partners, discussion of additional resources, putting a big order requests for approximately 7 p.m. that first day. 50 strike teams had a pretty good idea that fire behavior was going to be difficult to hold. We knew we needed the resources, and the response, you're not going to get it. They're not available. Kick in the gut, let me tell you. Unavailable. They were unavailable. Multiple fires in the state, right? You have the Camp Fire burning in Northern California. You have the Hill Fire. Please, let me respond. The Hill Fire is burning a few miles away with its own challenges.
Okay, and then there's another question. There was actually several questions having to do with the resources, and I think we've touched on it, but I think it's something that we just need to stick with for a little bit, and that is to understand, as the chief articulated, firefighters in the field were requesting resources, And the question here on this card was, why didn't we get those 70 trucks that were supposed to be called on early? And so I think, I don't know if Chief Pena, if you want to take this one.
I can respond to that. They weren't available. They weren't available. And so what they were allocated to other fires. So what we did is that what Chief Richardson said is that we allocated all available resources from LA County Fire Department, from me on down to the student worker to this fire, all available resources, all hands on deck. We personally started calling other fire departments, LA City Fire Department, I think I mentioned that earlier, Orange County, San Bernardino, whomever. We need assistance, please send now. We'll worry about cost and agreements and everything later, but we need the resources now. We went around the mutual aid system to expeditiously get as many resources as we could to your community to protect your property and your lives.
All right, this next question, I know in conversation with city staff and what I've seen on blogs, is a question that keeps coming up. I think it's a difficult question to answer specifically, but I think it's a question worthy of conversation. Why were fire trucks and firefighters just sitting there while homes were burning? Hold on. On flat ground and in places like Point Doom, Malibu Park, and Malibu West.
So you want to take that one?
Too many stories of this. Where was command and common sense? So I think in the stack here, there's a lot of very similar questions. A lot of them are in different areas. And so instead of trying to address each and every neighborhood, I think we can look at this question from more of a global perspective. And then a lot of this, I don't think we're going to be able to tell you the fire engine in front of your house why it did or didn't do something. But I think it's a good subject of conversation. Chief Pena.
Vince Pena, Deputy Chief North Operations. So I'm responsible for the north part of the county, the IMT teams, and Air and Wildland Division, and with the helicopters, the crews, and the wildland firefighting resources. And to tell you, like Tom was saying, like the fire chief was saying, we cannot at this time identify every action from every unit out there. And the units, strike teams are a term that's been thrown around here a lot, and that is basically 5 fire engines and a leader and a battalion chief. So we had 46, 45 strike teams out there, and we had another 46 ordered, which we didn't get. And when we started the fire, we had several strike teams, a full robust alarm over miles into Ventura County. And those resources fought fire all night long from the very top end, if you see on the map. And the map depicts the fire progression. And as those resources are working all night long, they're expected to get a break at 6 or 7 in the morning to have a new shift, but the fire spotted the freeway. They kept working for another 24 hours. And then they get hung up around Cornell and Fire Station 65 where the homes are. And then they get over to Malibu Lake and that area. And I thought we were going to get, we lost a lot of homes in Malibu Lake, but I thought we were going to lose a lot more than that. And then it starts going over to Canaan. And then they're all chasing it. And then we're ordering more resources. And that's when the work took place from the fire chief and Chief Richardson making those phone calls and basically dumped half of the LA County Fire Department, 100 fire engines. We have about 200, and we had 100. We had 20 strike teams because, once again, a strike team is that 5-engine configuration. And now they're coming. And now we can only get there via Malibu Canyon in most places because of the infrastructure collapse, the power lines, the power poles. I mean, all those canyons, Decker, Encino, Canyon, it looked like, and if you folks drove around there, if you evacuated from there, it looked like King Kong grabbed a box of toothpicks and threw it all over those roads and those canyons. We had multiple fire trucks trapped, battalion chiefs, they're backing out, trying to get to the beach, trying to get down there. So everybody, was working, everybody was spread out. Now at times, there's folks that are staged, and they're staged at Pepperdine, they're staged at Zuma Beach. Those are very few safety zones. and they're designed. We train for this. We've had extensive training for years and years for this fire. We just, and you've heard it before at other council meetings, you know, we're not used to it so dynamic where it's taken out all the corridors, all the canyons. It only didn't get into one. So anyway, they do have to stage and get their plan together and to ensure that when they go up that canyon and they go into those homes, it may look safe, but identifying where the fire is, where the fire is going, that it doesn't trap them when they're going to their assignment. And that takes a little bit of time. It looks like they're not doing anything, but they're out there, they're doing it. Now remember, we've had fires. You know, you remember 96, the Calabasas fire? There was a lady that was leaving her house to evacuate late, and she got fire trucks stopped mid-slope at 12:30 in the afternoon at the wrong time when the fire was going up Malibu Bowl off of Newell, and it basically burned up a strike team, 5 engines of LA City engines going up there to protect the house. And then at the same time, firefighter Jensen from Glendale, engine 24, almost died and sustained 1,800-degree heat.
Our next conversation piece is to talk about aircraft, so that's a perfect segue. So there's several questions, I think about 5 questions, and let me read through all of them, and then that'll kind of frame the rebuttal. Please explain why large air tankers, how you use large air tankers to fight fires. There's one having to do with the super scoopers. There was a question whether they were sent to another fire, and were the super scoopers deployed here, or were they deployed on other fires? Where were the super scoopers? Is it true that you recommended against them in 2013? Why do we not have more planes? And why did you recommend against the super scoopers? I'm not sure the nature of that. And then there's a question about the utilization of military aircraft to support water drops. So with that, Chief Pena, would you like to take that?
All right, I'm going to try it again. So to start out with the super scoopers, we had the full air ops response from LA County. The 2 super scoopers at 2:30, 2:45 in the afternoon in Ventura on Thursday. And we had 2 Hawks, 2 Firehawks, and we had our Helco ship. And so that's our full response. And it went, and the super scoopers flew, and the contract crane, the contract helitanker was dropped 1,800 gallons. Those 3 pieces of equipment flew till nighttime with whatever other, we had a couple Cal Fire S2s, fixed wing that came in, but once again, they had trouble coming in from the other fire. So we only got 1 drop each from them, and that's disappointing. But we had all our stuff there. Now at nighttime, the fixed wing from any agency is grounded. The super scoopers are grounded. The contract crane is grounded. That's just the industry. That's how it works. So now there was probably a Type 2 helicopter from one of the other outside agencies. We had some Type 2, we had some copters from LA City, but then they went, probably by about 9, 10 at night, they went down. But we had our 2 Firehawks flying all night long. That's Thursday. They flew all night long. Now, the next day, Friday morning, the fixed wing did not show up. Now, it was, you had fixed wing grounded due to the weather conditions. And the super scoopers, we had them up early. Before 7 in the morning, they were up, but we couldn't get them down over there by PCH down there in Malibu. We couldn't get them there because of the turbulence, the fire conditions, that the plume, as you saw in the video, you had that plume that was leaning over, and they couldn't get under the column to make their drops, and it was too turbulent. And then the fixed wing at about 35, whether it's super scoopers or otherwise, military aircraft as well, fixed wing pretty much grounded at 35 mile an hour with winds. And we had winds much higher than that. Now, our Blackhawks, our Firehawk helicopters, they flew all day. They flew all day on Friday, like they did all night, and from the inception on Thursday. Now that is in a nutshell what happened in that period of time. And what I do have a pilot here, Mike Sadri is our senior pilot, and he was on the fire, flew 2 days straight. And if you want more on that air ops piece, I could have him speak. Would you like to, Mike? It's a welcoming environment. You've heard me say that before, right?
My name is Mike Sagely, and I'm a senior pilot in the air operations section. And I will say, just to start, I've been flying a little over 32 years now. I've been flying a little over 32 years now, about 12 in the fire industry. And I can tell you that this was some of the most challenging conditions that I've seen and probably will ever see in my career. So Chief Pena spoke briefly about the other aircraft beyond LA County. I will say unequivocally that the first 48 hours our aircraft were in the air, probably in the neighborhood of about 40 of that. And we brought in maintenance personnel. We brought in additional crews. So I flew from about 2:30 on Thursday till about 10 o'clock Thursday night. Aircraft went down for about an hour. There's maintenance that has to be performed on those aircraft, and there's no question about that. The aircraft at times have to come down, so that unfortunately eats up a little bit of critical time, potentially. Night crews came in, turned right around, went right back out. So I can tell you that we have the best firefighting helicopter on the planet. The taxpayer dollars are well spent in that regard. Chief Osby has invested additional money for additional aircraft that are in the process of becoming the Firehawks. Generally, we are the only aircraft flying in those conditions when the winds exceed that 30 to 50 knot range. I've seen 60 and 70 knot wind. But I will also tell you that in some instances, when the wind is 25 or 30 knots, it's still unflyable conditions. It just depends. It depends on the stability of the air, and it depends on what the fire is doing as well. So on the leeward side, on the Malibu side, on Friday, which is where I was the entire day, you didn't see fixed wing there. They were unable to fly because of those conditions. So what I would say is the safety of the crew obviously is the most important thing, but fixed wing aircraft as well as contract air, I will say operate on a little different restrictions and requirements, where we have the leeway to fly in conditions that would otherwise generally ground aircraft. Now, the pilot always has the option to say no, and that's not what we do. That's not who we hire. That's not the way we approach the fire. I can tell you that I went back on my own time to see what houses I tried to protect and whether or not they were still there. And that was a very difficult thing for me because I spent a lot of heart and soul on that. Some made it, some did not. Probably one of the most frustrating conditions in terms of there was so much going on that you don't know what to choose. Why do I choose your house or your house or your house? And I don't even know who you are. It's akin to combat as far as I'm concerned. And that same frustration is the same thing I had felt on that fire. So typically we like to do a coordinated attack, aircraft, ground resources. We're able to do that on the initial attack portion to the best of our ability. The timeline at 2:30 in the afternoon, fixed wing go away, contract go away. The wind came up. The wind actually increased in velocity after dark, which was normally not the case. So now we don't have that coordinated attack as the fire becomes larger. Now the resources then become spread out, and now they tend to work a little more independently, and now it's just a struggle to get reorganized. And I think that's some of the frustration that you were seeing, that we were feeling on both sides of the fence. So I think the next time I worked with the fixed wing was on Sunday morning. And I know there's a lot of discussion about the Quebecs, and I will tell you they're an important part of our strategy, but they're not the answer, and we're not the answer in this particular instance. They have a window where they work very well. It's something that we need collectively with the helicopters, but generally the helicopters are the only things that can work in this type of scenario. We're the only ones that can get close enough to be effective, and it becomes nothing but structure protection at that point. And I don't know if I answered the question or not, but I wanted to make that clear, I know how frustrated you are. My parents, I lost my home in '89 in the 49er fire, so I understand the frustration. I understand. I get it, and I can tell you that for me and the folks that I work with, we're out. We're being told not to fly. You need to rest, or the aircraft need to come down for maintenance, whatever the case may be. Our guys go, as well as the ground crew, and you know, we're here to do what we do as well as we can. And this is a 1%er. 99% of the time, you don't hear about the fires all over the county that never get to this point. Unfortunately, this is the one. This is the bad one that we just couldn't take care of for you. So, well, in many instances, I will tell you that under certain circumstances, you can have 20 or 30 helicopters or aircraft, and it actually becomes less productive. So what you need is you need the right resources at the right time, and you need to be able to cycle them continuously. So we have resources essentially to go about 48 to 72 hours. Beyond that, it becomes that extended attack, and that's where the other resources from the state or the feds come into play. So right now we're in the process of expanding our air operations with the Firehawk. That, in my opinion, my personal opinion, is the best aircraft that you can buy. And I know that sounds like a recording, but I've been with that aircraft for 32 years. I've flown it all over the world. Nothing performs better. Nothing can handle the conditions that we have here in LA County. We have those. They're very expensive. They're expensive to operate. But if you want the best, you have the best. The question is, what can we afford and how many do we want in the end?
All right, thanks, Mike. I think that puts a good, go ahead. I think it's good to be able to hear from, if you want to call it, he wasn't really boots on the ground, he was boots in the air, but I think it gives good perspective. One of the perspectives I think that's important as he talks about aircraft is we currently have a fleet of 8 helicopters owned by the county. We're expanding that with 2 additional Black Hawk helicopters that are in the process of being converted now. That'll give us a total of 5 Black Hawks and then 5 Bell 412s. But I think it's also important to recognize that in certain circumstances, you could have every aircraft available and you're not going to outfight Mother Nature. And so I think his comment about affordability has to be factored in. We have to be able to look and say, what is sustainable, what is the right mix, and we continue to do that. So what I want to do, because I think we got about 45 minutes, and I don't want to focus 100% on operations and then leave out some of the other important things. We can circle back, but I wanted to move on to evacuations because I know there was a lot of frustration with the evacuation piece. And so let's get started on evacuations. I don't even really need to look at some of these cards. I think one of the global questions is the timing of the evacuation, and I'll get into them specifically, but I want to start on a global level. The timing of the evacuations and the implementation of the evacuations, and for those people that evacuated on PCH, the extremely challenging process of going from Malibu to Santa Monica. Okay, so with that, does either one of you want to jump on that?
Sure, I can share the fact that evacuations is the key, right? As already mentioned, life safety is our #1 objective when we respond to any incident. A wildland fire of this nature is no different. I can tell you early on, you have a fantastic assistant fire chief by the name of Anthony Williams, who works very hard in this community, working along with his law enforcement partners from the Sheriff's Department, working with the city to identify early on those zones for evacuation. As you can imagine, as the fire progressed on the other side of the 101 freeway, mandatory evacuations, and I know for a fact up to Mulholland, from the other side of the freeway up to Mulholland, those are all voluntary evacuations. And again, this was early the evening of the first night of the fire. And those orders, those communications, and again, There's 4 other cities that were involved with the fire. That communication is being made to those cities, and information is being provided to the community members. Fast forward, I know once the fire spotted across a little after 5 a.m. in the morning, and trying to contain that was going to be challenging. We knew what the potential concern was. At that point in time, I believe that it was mentioned earlier, communicating again with the Sheriff's Department to evacuate all of Malibu. So that decision was made to get the word out. I know reverse 911 was utilized by the city, trying to communicate with all the citizens to provide that information and for folks to get out. Now, I know it's important, I believe, in mentioning, I know a lot of folks stayed behind. And I will tell you, as a public safety professional, it becomes very challenging because now it provides another risk associated with what we're trying to do. Not only trying to affect rescues, a bunch of 911 calls came in as soon as that fire came over and started coming down the mountain. As Fire Chief mentioned, moving resources around, trying to knock on doors and making sure people were safe. We had sons and daughters of residents in the city that were reporting, hey, I think my relative is trapped. So now we're moving resources from one location where they were set up to go effect a rescue if needed. In many cases, the fire was not near the property, just to share with you. So now we're taking a valuable, limited resource away from focus of what the strategy was going to be to move them to somewhere else to effect this rescue that came in on a 911 call. I'm telling you the reports we got back from the field. Okay, I'm sharing factual information as we know it. And it's hard to hear, but that's what was occurring. In regards to the, I know there was issues once that order was given to evacuate. There were challenges along PCH to work hand in hand with the CHP, trying to open all 4 lanes to get people southbound. Pardon? I know it happened. The fact that there are a lot of people, maybe in this room, spent hours on PCH trying to get out of town. I don't think I'm misspeaking in regards to that. So moving forward, lesson learned, is there a better way to effectively communicate? And this is something we'll take away and look at, as the fire chief has mentioned. There's a couple after action reports that are coming moving forward to be able to identify those areas to improve in the future, whether it be the notification, whether it be the actual egress out of a community. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. So the next question has to do with, it's more of a specific question. Why was eastern Malibu kept under mandatory evacuations when the fire did not burn there for 5 days? Chief Pena, do you want to take that one?
So the evacuations are, once we implement evacuations, the subject of repopulation is joint. It's joint with the cities, it's joint with the county areas, and the big partner is going to be the utility companies and law enforcement as well. So that's with law enforcement, we have 2 meetings a day, and we have the map out, and each partner comes and brings their issues, what they have going in, whether it's eastern Malibu or somewhere else, or in a canyon, and they look at the different arteries that get to the areas that we need to have closed off. We had hundreds, thousands of over 1,000 power poles put in there. It took weeks. We had traffic issues where we had the bridge that was the bridge on the west side of Malibu Lakes on Mulholland, where Mulholland Highway was collapsed because it's a bridge and burned up. All those issues kind of add to the problem where it's just not so easy once you evacuate them to open it up. And it did take what? Well, one thing that did impact, if, and what day was that? What day? So we didn't knock down the fire threat in Malibu Canyon for 5 days. It took 5 days we had people in there after the fire started, maybe even more. We had VLATs coming in and dropping 3 days later on Malibu Canyon. There was fire in that canyon. That fire then will get to Sierra Retreat, it'll move on over to Montanito and get into Topanga Canyon. It took us 5-6 days to make sure that thing was sealed off. It wasn't a done deal. It looks okay. It looks like you don't have a big plume up there, but I could guarantee that thing was not put to bed. We had crews, we had aircraft on that thing in Malibu Canyon for a good 5 days. So that's all part of it. Although whether it's fire behavior, you have fire that's not contained, or you have utility issues, all that is part of it. That's the best I could do with that question. Thank you.
Okay. The next question has to do with, and there was several questions, so I'll summarize. It had to do with why it took so long to repopulate, to get people back into their homes. And again, I can take that one if you'd like, because we were actively engaged in this process. But I can tell you, first off, we evacuated a very, very large area. And we did that because the path of the fire you can look at historical perspectives, but there's no guarantee that the wind's not going to shift and push fire into areas that you were not anticipating. So the evacuation of the area south of the 101 to Malibu was a very, very large area, and it needed to be because the fire's path was not fully predictable. Then once we start securing areas and we're able to deem an area safe, then there has to be coordination for people to go back in. And every morning and every evening, we held coordination meetings with all of the partners involved. The primary driver was Edison, especially on the narrower roads, trying to ensure that they were going to be able to get the infrastructure and the power lines, first off, cleaned up the ones that were down, and then to be able to set poles and be able to start stringing the line. I don't remember what the count was, but several thousand poles had to be replaced across the entire fire area. And so, obviously, trying to, for the people that were living in the heart of Malibu, Point Dume area, they were probably some of the last people to be able to be allowed back in, just because of the infrastructure, trying to get it back up and running. And obviously with that, there's the other piece as we're looking at evacuations. We evacuate what we don't want to do, and Topanga was a prime example, is we don't want to have an onshore breeze change the fire direction and find ourselves in a position where we've told people that they can return home, and then a day later, we have to tell them to evacuate again. And so evacuation is a very sticky issue because you're trying to get it right the first time. You're trying to ensure the message is a standard message that's shared by everybody involved, from the incident commanders all the way down to the sheriff or CHP officer running the checkpoint. What I can tell you, though, is there's a lot of room for improvement. And what I can tell you, when we see people coming ashore with supplies via boat, what I can tell you is we should never have to do that. We should be able to coordinate. We should be able to coordinate and have, take these types of lessons and learn from them and figure out for the next large event, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a landslide, or whether it's another fire, how do we take these lessons and ensure that the people who did stay are able to be supported and be able to determine methods of improving the return time for people that were evacuated. So, and I think that's one of those things we talked about a lot is the relationship with the city. The city is committed. I know the reason you are all here today is because you're committed to getting back on your feet. You're committed to ensuring things like this, if they do happen again, there's a maximum level of preparedness, and that you, all the way down to the individual homeowner, have the ability to ensure a better outcome in the future. And so we plan on working with the city directly to focus on this issue of evacuations and support, and a number of other issues. One of the issues that keeps coming up, a lot of cards, has to do with volunteerism. And the thought of, I know it's 271s, they're in Point Dume, they have the Corral, yeah. And so the question is there an option to expand and have a local firefighters from the community serve in a volunteer capacity for events such as this. So Chief Pena, do you want to take that one? Or Chief Osby?
Yeah, well, as it relates to what Chief Ewald just mentioned, is that we've already met with the city, and we're committed to looking at successes and also lessons learned. And if there's a willingness in a sustainable way for members of this community to have a call fire station or a volunteer fire department like we have in Corral Canyon or Topanga Canyon, then we're going to collaborate with the city of Malibu, and we're supportive of that. But what I will say is that we're going to collaborate, we're going to coordinate. It's going to take commitment in all ends, but definitely as it relates to public safety, if we have members of the community that are willing to commit to that, then we're going to support that.